Good evening and welcome to First Issues. I'm Panatongwenya. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight on the program, we speak to some contractors who have a less than unpleasant experience to share with us about what their experience has been with delayed payments from various entities, whether private, parastatal or government. Many business owners or contractors will tell you one or more stories about how they had to chase payment from a client after delivering on contracted work. In a perfect world, payment is made soon after work had been completed, which is usually within 30 days. Now, unfortunately, the story turns quite the opposite direction in reality, as many contractors cry burning tears brought on by contractors who are slow on their feet to make payment on completed work. The consequence brought on by this is a ripple effect that causes business owners or managers to stall payments to other parties in a bid to bridge the late payment gap, while others resort to a recruitment and staff salary freeze. This results in understaffed organizations and demoralized staff that struggle to deliver on work, which can potentially have catastrophic ramifications on the country's economy. While there are regulations and contracts that govern the order of business in most institutions, including when suppliers are to be paid, why do employees who are tasked to observe these regulations have a lackluster enthusiasm to carry them out? With us now is Khaole Minyane, a local businessman in the entertainment space, who details how at one point he had to go 6 months without payment from a client. He says such clients must be fined or jailed, as is the law in countries like Kenya. Leminyan explains that the legislature must recognize that small-medium enterprises are the biggest drivers of the economy, and by being denied payment on time, the economic performance of the country suffers as well.
My experience has been delayed payments for as long as up to 4 months, even 6 months sometimes. So it's a very disheartening issue for businesses because it messes up the business cash flow. It sours relationships with your service providers, because also as a business you engage other people to work with and you give them assurance based on the assurance that you got from your client, that you will pay them at a certain time, based on the work that they have done.
Quite interesting that you bring that up. How do you think then that this kind of setup is affecting the economy as a whole? Because you're talking about different players in this chain that you're in.
Yeah, if one of the links in the chain is weak, then the entire chain will collapse. So that's the easiest analogy. So if payment, for instance, does not come on time, it affects the cash flow of the business. It affects creditors, it affects debtors, it affects supply. And so if you are, for instance, a restaurant, if you are unable to pay suppliers for your food, you will not be getting food. You won't have anything to cook. Your employees will not be paid. Your rental will not be paid. And as a result, your business will completely collapse. And so it's a very, very important part of the chain, part of the value chain, that payments happen, and they happen promptly on time, so that businesses become sufficient.
So in an ideal world, payments are supposed to be made within 30 days of work completion, but you're talking about 6 months. So how have you been able to what sort of measures have you adapted to bridge the gap between the payment now and the next payment?
Fortunately for some of us, we've built relationships with the service providers that we work with. And so it's just going back to them and trying to explain to them. But sometimes you need a service that you may not necessarily have within your network. And so in that case, it becomes very difficult if you have some savings somewhere, which a lot of us don't have. So it becomes very difficult for you to manage. And so it's a very, very difficult situation to find yourself in, because in a lot of cases you are unable to find anything to assist you with. So in response to your question, we're not coping.
How has that affected your work morale, their livelihood as well? Because these are things that we need to take into consideration.
If people are not paid at the end of the month, when they are supposed to be paid. Now remember, they have commitments. You know, some people have rent to pay, they have school fees to pay, they have transport to get to work. So they become demoralized. So, and perhaps that's why, you know, there is low staff morale. And less productivity mo ditirong tsa rona mo Botswana, where people ba ya tirong hela just because motho o hirilwe. Ke gone hela, you know, in a lot of cases, especially for small businesses, morale is very low. In a lot of cases, you know, you are unable to keep people if you can't pay them. And so it's a very, very difficult situation to deal with.
Every company, every organization has policies and regulations in place that, you know, they regulate how the order of work has to go. So then, if those are in place, what then do you think is causing these late payments? Because there's an agreement before you start work, there's a contract. So then what happens?
It's just individuals within organizations. Culture ya go bereka ha yo mo rona hela motho ha hirilwe o ipolela la re ke hirilwe. You know, there's a saying ya batho ba re ba go le ka pen, when somebody feels indispensable gore ene o hirilwe go re go sa kgathaletse gore o dirang, whether ba productive or not, they cannot be touched by anybody because go ra gore ene permanent and pensionable. So it's individuals who are supposed to do what they're supposed to do. So motho hela a hirilwe gore sa gagwe ke gore a process the invoice ha di goroga, then they just sit on the invoices to the extent that sometimes they disappear. Maybe 2 months down the line o tshwanetse re go bo duetswe o phone go inquire. Remember, they don't call you, you will call them to inquire. How follow up? Only then do they say, oh, invoice le kana a bgagitse gore e kae. 2 months later, you are inquiring. You know, if they were cognizant of the fact that I'm supposed to have done this, they are supposed to say to you, your invoice is missing. I see there was a purchase order that went out to your company, but we haven't paid you. We haven't paid you because we haven't received your invoice. No, how we how let's 2 months later.
What needs to happen then? If it's cyclic, if it's something that has been going on, it affects not only a single organization, but organizations as a whole, and then ultimately the whole country's economy. What needs to happen?
There must be a legislature that comes into place. There must be legislation that will criminalize this kind of activity. I'll tell you why. Because I believe if you're gonna go for the whole month without processing payments, when your job is to process payment, I think you're stealing from the company that has employed you. So I think somebody like that needs to be prosecuted, that needs to be treated as a crime. And I believe it must hit those individuals in their pocket, in the sense that perhaps later now we must start charging interest. Turnaround time as a company is 1 month, and after a month I still have not been paid. I must levy interest. But interest should not be passed to the company. It should be taken off of the employee's salary. I think once that happens, then I think that's the only way we can address this, because then it's going to hit your pocket as somebody who just sits in the office and does nothing. Just one last thing. Recently, Kenya has actually criminalized this type of activity. Yeah, absolutely. So I think in Botswana it's about time. Otherwise, as I said earlier, the economic transformation that the president is talking about will never happen. That I promise you.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back to First Issues. Before the break, we were talking to Kgaoele Mmenyane, one of many business people in Botswana who are experiencing challenges with late payments from clients. He says this normalized state of affairs should be made illegal, with perpetrators fined, jailed, or both. Here with us now is Thusang Butale, the Secretary General of the Botswana Federation of Trade Unions. He says the struggles faced by Lemenyane are not unique to him alone, as the same is faced by various other contractors. He says employees are expected to perform diligently well despite their cash flow inconveniences, which are caused by their clients. Be that as it may, we asked if in some instances contractors are not to blame for the challenges they face, as it has been found in some instances they do not follow certain procedures. How impactful are late payments to contractors, their businesses and to their employees?
To contractors, what we normally see is when you get a late payment, it gives us what we normally say a trickle-down effect or a ripple effect on the company itself, because the company itself will not be able to sustain itself for once. And when you get to workers, it has a bigger impact, because you'd realize as workers we have, we work around and center everything around our payment date. So when you have a late payment date, basically what happens is your bills are centered around the same, your debts are centered around the same, and when your payment is late, you'll not be in a position to pay your bills on time, you'll not be in a position to pay your debts on time. And what it does normally is, imagine if you have a loan, for instance, and you are earning 2,000, you basically work your life around what you are getting and what you need to do your budget. So if you have a late payment, your loan goes through and there's no funds in the bank, you get what you call a penalty and a charge, which normally these days is about almost 200 pula, and you did not budget for the 200 pula. So what basically happens is it affects your budget for the whole month. And that's just one on the budget issue. But as an employee, you start worrying about issues of sustainability of the company. And what it does then is it brings welfare issues into play, because you start worrying about how your company will be doing, whether you'll be redundant in the near future, retrenchment issues, and so on.
Now you've touched on an issue that most probably we tend to neglect. If you're having employees who tend to look at issues of redundancy at the workplace and issues of retrenchment, that means that an employee would then go seek employment elsewhere.
When your company, your employees start worrying about redundancy issues, you'd notice the first employees that start going or leaving the company are the ones who are productive, the ones who are experienced, because those are the ones who will start getting jobs very quickly and reasonably within a shorter period of time. So once a company starts losing people of that caliber, it then makes the company to suffer more, because it then leads to it now employing people with less experience, and it leads to the company not producing as well as it should if it had those other employees who are more productive and more experienced. So basically, the company starts suffering.
What responsibility in some instances that you have seen, has it been the contractor's fault actually that they were paid late?
In instances where it's the contractor's fault to be paid late, it's an issue of, if you have an agreement to say you bring an invoice 2 weeks before, and then you bring an invoice late for payment, then that would generally affect when you are going to be paid, because you brought the documents late, processing took time to be done. Secondly, it's a performance issue. There might be an agreement that you have to reach a certain level. I know in construction, you can have an agreement, when you get to roof level, I'll pay you this much. When you get to complete the roofing, I'll pay you this much.
And it has to be at this
and
time.
It has to be based on what you have done, what you have achieved. And if you fail to achieve those, you won't get payment. And it will generally mean you get payment late, because you are going to complete those at a later period. We recently released our Workers' Manifesto, which then covers a variety of issues. And when we spoke or drilled down on the small, micro, and medium enterprises, it's one of the issues that we've made very clear to say, we need to empower the small, micro, and medium enterprises and make them more efficient, because they are the drivers. And one way is, as we empower citizens, the small companies, we need to know that we can't have small companies being treated the same way as the bigger companies. When you need to pay a smaller company by the 10th, that has to be done. Because a company that is setting up that is small ordinarily does not have enough cash to save so that it could pay next month's salary. So if payments for those small, micro and medium enterprises are done on time, it will then make the process efficient. It will make them more sustainable and make them easily, or it will make it easier for them to grow because they'll be able to finance their production levels.
To wrap up our conversation, what advice would you give to the people that you represent, those contractors, about where to seek help, how to go about seeking the help?
Yes, I would say, the most important thing when you are in the workplace for industrial relations, for good peace, it's consultation and communication. Companies should note that and notice all the time that unions are not there to always be fighting with the employer. But it's always equally important that we consult each other where there are problems so that we can all come up with solutions. When employees feel consulted, they become alive to issues. Welfare improves because when we know what's causing our salaries to be late, we appreciate that it's not because we are redundant or the company is going down the drain. It's because of other issues that are making payments difficult. It could be like what we are saying from the contractors, from the suppliers, not paying on time. But the most important thing is let's communicate and be able to come up with solutions together in the employment relations.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back to First Issues and to another edition of our Own Your Day, Own Your Life productivity segment. Tonight, resident guest Dr. Kiran Bhagat talks to us about how urbanization is one of the contributing dynamics to a decline in our health. He says that packaged foods and readily available store-bought foods are some of the elements responsible for an unhealthy people.
Lifestyle changes and lifestyle diseases are on the rise because of an urbanization that's occurred. People have moved from the cattle post to the car. People have moved from the country to the city. And so lifestyles have changed. It's an 8 to 5 lifestyle. It's a rushed lifestyle. It's a stressed lifestyle. It's an office lifestyle. It's an indoor lifestyle. So food is not prepared from vegetables from the garden. Food is bought from a supermarket. Beverages are, you don't milk the cow, you buy the milk from the supermarket. You go out for lunch or you go to a simausu and you get your takeaway. And so what has happened is industry has surrounded an urbanized population with the conveniences of a city. And those conveniences have become inconveniences from a medical perspective. So you eat the wrong foods, or you eat too much and you go back to the office. We have a sitting culture. We sit and we eat, we sit and we work, we sit and we drive, we sit and we watch television. We are basically sedentary people. We should be out and about. If you think about our ancestors, they were out in the field, they were out in Masimu, they were plowing, they were hoeing, they were weeding. They were physically active. We have become inactive. So as a result of inactivity and the foods that we eat, because they are convenient, they are highly processed, they are highly saturated with fat and sugar and salt, you tend to put on weight. So what happens is you tend to put on weight because you're fed by the industry, the food industry that sells you the Coca-Colas, that sells you the chocolates, that sells you the cereals and the energy bars and the chocolate bars and the fast food takeaways. So you start eating the wrong food, you start exercising less, you're in an environment where your boss gives you work to do, you now have a computer, you have a cell phone, you take that work home. So before, when the sun set back out in the cattle post, there were no lights, you fell asleep. You fell asleep at the time that the sun set. Now we have junk light. We don't have light, we have neon lights. That doesn't provide any vitamin D. So you're indoors, you're on your phone, you're doing some work, you're responding to emails, you may have a computer at home, so the work never leaves you. So you're continually stressed. So you start producing chemistry of an animal that is continually stressed. In the caveman day, the stress chemistry was only produced when a lion was chasing you, or you were chasing a rabbit to get food. You'd raise your adrenaline, you'd raise your steroids to try and make your heart beat faster, your muscles stronger. And then when you kill the animal or you ran away from the lion, the chemistry would die down. Now the lion is the office, it's the work, it's the boss who's continually down your throat, who you can't get rid of because he's always on at the touch of an email, he can contact you. So your stress chemistry is continually on the rise. When those chemicals are continually on the rise, it produces the conditions that we see today. It produces muscle tension, it produces cramp, it produces headache, it produces lack of sleep because your brain can't rest. It produces hunger because you're always stressed. When you're stressed, the body thinks it's stressed, it's hungry, it needs food. So you eat a lunch bar, you feel better. It gives you a quick fix. You put on weight, your blood pressure goes up, your sugar goes up, you become diabetic, you develop heart disease because your arteries get blocked. So these are end conditions and end diseases that we've imposed upon ourselves. So this is the reason why we're seeing lifestyle changes that occur today.
Thank you for watching yet another episode of Own Your Day, Own Your Life. Join us again next week where we learn of some of the considerations we can make to better our lives. Until then, we wish you pleasant viewing. Good night. This program was brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?